Hello, everybody. Jeanette Anderson here. Welcome to this week's Podacity Show. I'm Jeanette Anderson, and I am pleased to have fabulous Jodie Taves with me here this week. Jodie and I met quite a few months ago through a mutual friend who introduced us and who said, she's brilliant. You just got to know this woman. And we talked, and I love your passion for design, for brand, for helping people really present themselves to the marketplace. So I'm really happy you're here, Jodie. Great to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to give you Jodie's official bio, and then we'll find out the real juicy bits afterwards. So here's her official information. Jodie Taves shifted from a career in athletic therapy to graphic design as a course correction back to her original roots and training in the fine arts. Jodie has a passion for helping health professionals and small businesses in the outdoor industry develop strong, clear brands and confidence marketing their services online. Since 2017, Jodie Taves Design has partnered with 40 plus businesses and organizations to create visual identities, websites, and marketing materials. Many of her clients have never worked with designers or web developers before, and she makes that a smooth and easy process. And today we're going to talk about how to attract better clients with your visual brand. So that's a really important topic. A lot of people are really concerned about their brand. So I'm really glad you're here to talk. If you guys have questions, put them in the chat, and either now during the show or afterwards, then Jodie or I will provide some input or feedback. But that's the official bio. Now I really want to hear the juicy bits. So tell me something about you we wouldn't guess or wouldn't know reading your bio or your About Us page. What's something no one would guess about you?
No one would guess. I feel like that might be a hard one. I was actually one of the women that I was part of a bobsled team for about one run at the Calgary Olympic Park. I got to be the third person on a four-woman bobsled team because they needed a spare. Someone was injured, and I got called up because I was involved in that world, and it was an incredible experience. I got to be part of the bobsled team.
Oh, cool! That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
And how did you get involved in that world? What was that?
Well, yeah, that's my background in athletic therapy. So when I moved to Calgary, I was part of a gym that trained a lot of bobsledders, skeleton athletes. And so I knew some people through there, and I got pulled in. They needed an extra.
That's pretty cool. Okay, well, see, now we have something more in common because people would never guess this, but I actually used to be a luger.
Oh, did you?
I was a whitewater rafting guide for 4 years, and in the winter, where whitewater rafting guides go and luge so that they get that up and down experience with
adrenaline
withdrawal. And so I did it a few times. I was not a big fan of the going head first one. That was scary. And even though you're not very far from the ground, I was still scared because it's fast. You go fast.
It's really fast.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of cold anyways. So at the best of times, it was like, oh, why am I out here where it's cold? Anyway, so what got you into graphic design? You have a background in fine arts, but what really turned you on about design?
The graphic design piece came because I saw it as a way to start working remotely. I wanted to move out to the mountains. My husband and I were working towards more like a Western lifestyle, and I didn't see myself as working as an athletic therapist long-term or as it really being a great viable option. And so it was a remote work or income option. And so that's actually what kind of first piqued my interest on top of the background in fine arts.
And you were back doing this before we had to do this. Before it became a thing. Why is brand so important? Why do people need to worry about a visual brand? And when do they need to worry about a visual brand? So let's talk about the why first, but then I want to talk about the when because I have some very definite opinions about that. So tell me about the why we need brand.
Well, I think one of the reasons why we need a brand is because we don't have a lot of time to make a first impression. So if we think about businesses right now as everything's online, whether it's your Instagram account, your website, presentations, whatever it is, you have seconds to make that first impression. And so your brand is actually quite important in creating a connection really quickly because it's visual. And so our impressions are visual right off the hop. And that's where the visual brand is important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, my other question was when, because here's my bias, is that people who are getting into business shouldn't focus on their brand right away because they don't know who they are, what they serve, and who they serve. And so they go in and spend a lot of time creating a logo and a website and all this stuff, only to have to change it 6 months or a year later when they actually figure out who they are and what they're selling and to whom. So that's my kind of bias. Now, is that true from your experience? What would you say?
I would agree with that. I think you typically will need something to start, but you don't really know. Yeah, you don't have that information. You don't maybe even have the experience of who you like working with. You might have an idea of who you want to work with, but it takes a few years before you actually know who you actually like working with, before there's like that practical knowledge, not just this ideal of who it is, and even what your brand is about. So I really like working with businesses at about that 3-year mark. So they've got 3 years of business. They've started to figure out they're actually quite clear on who it is that they like to serve and what their brand is. They quite often need some help coaxing that information out. Like it still feels fuzzy for them, but it's really fun to work with businesses at that stage because they've learned something, they're past that beginner phase, and then we get to actually create a brand based off of real information instead of just guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. And so what I would hope you guys hear out of that is, don't, my personal bias is, don't invest a lot of time, money, and effort into branding in the first year of your business. Wait till you're a little clearer, or a lot clearer, on who you serve, what you're selling, and who you like to engage with, and who you are in the marketplace. Then invest in it. And because you're likely going to redo it, and typically a lot of people redo it at about the 3-year mark. That's when they really start to either be viable or not, and they've gone through the friends and family thing, and if they're still around, now they actually have to have a business that's recognizable and be clear in the market and put their stick in their sand and say, okay, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, how do we represent that?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about some branding do's and don'ts. What are some of the keys to attracting better clients with your visual brand? So how does visual brand help with that?
Yeah, so I broke down the visual brand into 3 steps, which is similar to even just my own creative process now at this point. And that is, number 1 is understanding what your brand is. So we're just talking about that, where you need to know who you are, where you would like your business to go. So that vision for your business, and then who your audience is. And sometimes your audience is, who are you actually serving? Sometimes it's more, who do you want to serve? Maybe you're not attracting awesome clients and you just need to shift something to attract better ones, but you need to know what you're trying to accomplish. So that's number 1, is actually getting clear on what your brand is. And I always say, write it down. It's one thing to have it in your head, but you got to write that stuff down. So just answering some simple questions can be really helpful. And so there are a couple of questions. Like I like to know what the answer is for, why did you get started in your business? Because that gives you a good idea of what your values are for your business, which can then be communicated visually. And then I also like to know what your vision is for your business in the next 1 to 5 years, because you don't want to create this brand based on maybe what you're doing right now, or not matching what you want in the future, because you want to set yourself up for success, and you don't want to have to rebrand yourself every year, because then no one knows who you are, and that's just a lot of time and effort wasted. So really getting clear on what your vision is for your business. And then I like to actually ask the question of, how do you want people to feel when they're interacting with your business? So it starts to look at the emotional response you want people to have to your brand. So do you want them to feel excited? Do you want them to feel cared for? Do you want them to feel like, yeah, I'm a badass? Like, what emotions do you want to invoke with your brand? I like to ask that question. It just gives you some really good adjectives and direction there. And then digging into who your ideal client is. Are they, are they male or female? Do they, what age are they? Where do they live? What makes them tick? What turns them off? Getting a sense of who that person is, and not just the demographics, but where would they shop? What brands do they tend to pick? Because that can be really helpful for you to figure out what your brand needs to look like, or what your visual identity needs to look like. So that's the number 1, of just getting clear on what your brand is. And then once you figure that out, the beauty of that is you get to use that as a filter then. So if you already have branding in place, you can then take those questions and start to filter what you're currently using through that lens. So looking at your logo, You want to know, is your logo actually communicating what you do, or is it communicating who you are as a business? Our logos really aren't supposed to tell people what we do. They're really supposed to be an identifier, something that connects with your audience really quickly. If you're a gym owner, you might not want to have like a dumbbell in your logo because everyone has a dumbbell in their logo, and it doesn't really tell your audience about you. It just says about what you do. And then the color scheme too. So that's the other part. If we look at your visual identity, I usually break it down into your logo, your color palette, and then your fonts. Those are 3 quick things to look at. And so if you're looking at your colors, quite often we pick colors because of our own personal preference, but we really need to look at that through the lens of our audience. So if you're looking, maybe your services are supposed to be, you're trying to attract 40 to 50-year-old women who are just looking to be like nurtured and cared for and supported. You probably don't want to have an aggressive color palette that's like really in your face, because that's probably not going to attract the clients that you want. And you might actually be turning people away, even if they don't know it. They just subconsciously, they're like, oh, that's not what I want. It's too aggressive. That's just not where I'm at. So looking at your color palette in terms of what your audience needs, is attracted to, is looking for. And then the other one is actually just looking at your fonts as well, because fonts can say a lot. There's a lot of fonts out there. If you've ever used Canva or been on Google Fonts or just done a quick font search, there's a ton of them, and they can be used very well and they can be used very poorly. So fonts are actually a really tricky one, and they can make a big impact in terms of, does your brand look professional or does it look like Mickey Mouse amateur? Again, looking at the fonts, scrolly fonts might not be the best choice if you're like a performance brand. Maybe don't pick scrolly fonts. So that's evaluating your branding through the who are you as a brand.
That makes lots of sense. And yeah, I just literally changed the font from Bodacity. This is the old one.
Yeah.
Because it was too hard to read. I love the font. I love the script of it. I love it, but it was just too hard to read. So we picked Caution instead of Southern Air.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to read, and it's still a script font, so it's still got the feminine kind of look to it and boldness to it that we wanted. But you're right, it's got to be something that resonates with your audience. I really like the piece that you talked about, Jodie, that I think a lot of people forget in their branding and their marketing, is it's not for you. It's really about what feeling does it evoke in your clients. And even as you were saying, the bold colors might turn some people off, because we have a very assertive red as part of our thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because the brand is supposed to be about being bolder, creating your bold life, your bold business. And it doesn't necessarily, it can be too abrasive and too bold for people who want that. They're aspiring to it, but they aren't necessarily there yet.
Yeah.
So it is really important to see what the emotional reaction is from your audience. So what's one of the ways that people can get clear on the feeling that they want the brand to evoke in their audience, and then how do they clarify whether or not it does?
Yeah, that's getting clear on the feeling. I start visual identities with brand strategy, which we go through lots of different, questions you can ask, and we just start to try to filter and pull that information out. But that question of how do you want people to feel once they've interacted with your brand? I'm sure, Jeanette, for you have this clear understanding of like, how do you want women to feel after they've seen you on a Facebook Live or they've attended one of your courses? I think you as a business owner have a pretty clear idea of how you want people to feel.
Yep.
So even just writing those things down, that literally can give you like 3 adjectives that describe your brand, which can help you then start picking visuals to match.
Okay, cool. And so what are some of the ways that people can check whether or not their brand is in alignment with their market?
Yeah, writing out who your market is first. So you could have that in one column. And then if you actually took a look at your brand, look at your logo and evaluate your logo through the lens of your audience. Sometimes it's even helpful to actually, maybe you have a few trusted clients or customers that you work with. Sometimes just asking them is really helpful. Ask them what their first impression was. That can be really helpful to get feedback directly from clients. Quite often we tend to look to our family members or friends. Sometimes they're not members of our audience, then we're asking for their feedback when we're doing a branding project. But it's actually really important to go find people in your audience and just ask the question. So if you have a Facebook group, you could even just pop something into your Facebook group. Maybe you've been cultivating this audience, throw something up and be like, hey, what's your impressions? What does this feel like to you? Even just getting them to describe it to you can be helpful.
Yeah, great idea. And yes, I think the don't ask your grandma, your client, or the prospect who could be your client.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are some common mistakes that you see people making and entrepreneurs making? You've mentioned you work with over 40 clients or businesses now, just on their brand identity. What are some common mistakes that people?
I think it's trying to do too much with, sometimes it's trying to do too much with their logo. So they're trying to use their logo to describe what they do. And that's where all of a sudden you have this logo that looks like it's made out of, it's a clip art logo where you're like, oh, there's 3 different things in here. And we're trying to tell people this whole story in a logo. That's not really the purpose of it. You just need to keep it simple. Like you said, like it needs to be legible. You need to make sure that it looks good small, looks good big. So not overcomplicating things. Like you're always trying to simplify.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree. And I actually, not to, denigrate the work you do because it is important, but I really think the logo is minor in many regards to the brand's impact because really people don't buy based on a logo.
No,
They
it's the whole package.
recognize you based on a logo, or they might come to associate you with that image or something like that, but they don't, it's not as critical as a lot of people seem to think it is. The
Yeah.
overall look of the design and the marketing materials and the quality of them and the, like you said, fonts and colors and so forth, and layout and style and the kind of imagery used, that really does have a big impact. But the logo,
Yeah.
don't spend a lot of time and money and effort on it.
It's definitely only one piece of the puzzle, that's for sure. The other mistake I see a lot of people make is actually on their website. So we do website design and building as well. And it's the same thing. It's this like overcomplication of things, but I see fonts being used pretty horrendously. My designer eyes come in and I'm like, where am I supposed to look for? Because people use too many different fonts. And so it's the same thing. If you can pick 2 or 3 fonts and make sure that you've created this organization of this is a title, this is a subtitle, this is a paragraph, that can be really helpful because it doesn't confuse people when they come to their site. They know how to scan for the information because we have such short attention spans. If you pick a good font that you can read easy, that maybe comes in multiple different weights, your life gets so much easier and you can start organizing your website in a way that makes sense and is scannable. And that's one thing it's a real struggle for business owners that are DIYing their branding. Font, it sounds funny, but like fonts are a big deal.
They really are, and the overcomplicating. It's funny. I talk to clients about this a lot. And bolding something makes it a different font. Italicizing it makes it a different font, even if it's the
Yeah.
same font. Size of it, and so they end up with, even if they only have 2 fonts, but they have all these variations on them and various sizes and bolded and italics, and oh my goodness, too muchy. And so simplicity really helps.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the where the eye looks. So a big part of good design is that it takes people where you want them to go. What's, as a designer, one of your biggest challenges with working with clients? How can people be better clients to get more out of a designer?
For me, I work best with clients that trust me to do my job. So I'm definitely not an order taker style of designer. I like to come in and actually be a partner with you. I don't care if you can't tell me, exactly what you want or exactly what your vision is. Your job as a client, like when we're working together, is to be open with like where you'd like your business to go, give your business thought, be willing to think about those what is your brand questions, and then giving me the freedom to do what I do best, and then giving me good feedback. So feedback means it needs to be fairly specific. But again, it doesn't matter. Like it's such different languages going from visuals to actually verbal communication that I think that probably is the primary challenge, is always how do I talk about what it is that I want or what changes I need to make, because they are 2 kind of different languages.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
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 I do want to ask you one question before we wrap up, and we find out more about how we can connect with you, about how you made your leap, because it's one of the questions that I sometimes ask if we have time.
Yeah.
is not just about your expertise, but your journey as an entrepreneur. But before we go there, any last tips or hints that you would suggest to people when they're trying to find a good graphic designer to work with? What kinds of things do they need to be thinking about to hire the right person for them?
I would work with someone that asks questions. So if you just throw out all the information, you're like, I need a logo, I need this, I would be more inclined to work with a designer who maybe asks a couple questions back and make sure that they are clear on your project. So someone that can communicate, back and forth, isn't just going to assume that they know what you want and run with it and maybe come back with something that's totally off. I'd be looking for someone that, can clarify what you're looking for and is willing to have a conversation about it.
And I really appreciate what you said as well about hire the experts to do what they're good at, because you're not. And I know with Canva and a whole bunch of other solutions like that, people start to think that we're designers.
Yes.
And we're not, and we shouldn't be trying to be, and we should really understand and appreciate our lane.
Yeah.
And with Canva and Fiverr and Upworks, where you can hire cheap designers and so forth, they can be very beneficial, but you're going to get, in some ways, you're going to get what you pay for, but what you're going to get there is a lot of, like you said, order takers who are really just creating templated work and often regurgitating clip art type stuff.
Yeah.
You want someone who is actually a designer, who's going to design your brand in accordance with who you are and who your business is. Then you need to hire a professional. And
I think it depends on, just to add to that, it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for someone to do your branding and create your actual identity for you as a business, then I'd be looking for someone who's an expert so they can guide you through that process, because that's not typically our realm of expertise. Even for me, doing graphic design and branding, I'm like, I need help with my own branding because I need that objective kind of third party to come in and give me some insight. Versus if you just need business cards made, or you're looking for something quick that's just a piece of your brand, then that's a different thing, because there are lots of really good designers. And if you have a clear brand for them to work from, then they should be able to create something that's on brand and awesome for you and still be affordable. But if you're looking at setting you up for success, then that's where you want the expert versus like maybe Fiverr or something.
Exactly. And a lot of it really is getting clear on where the stage you are. And do you have the skills to be a creative director, which is when you're telling people what you want, how to lay it out, what to do with it, etc. If you don't have experience being a creative director, don't try and do creative direction.
Yeah, classic means many things to different people.
Exactly. And so, yes, people on Fiverr and Upwork are great at doing layout. They can do some basic design, but you really need to give them lots of information. And that information you get from a professional who tells you what that could look like. So give us a rough, I know this is like saying how much is a car or how much is a house. Give us a rough idea of what people can expect. Let's say they're in that third year, they're doing I'm going to call it a brand refresh, but
a rebrand.
It's really creating the brand as it should have been the first time, but at the appropriate time.
Yeah.
So let's say they're going through that create your brand process. About how much time and money should they expect to invest? And believe me, I get it could be anywhere from $500 to $50,000.
Yeah.
But for most small business people, what's a reasonable expectation? How much budget should they set aside?
Yeah, I would budget for probably around $2,000 for a really good rebrand that sets you up for success for the next 5 years. The thing is, at least two. And that's if you're not doing a website. That's just for your visual piece of it. The websites are going to be more, but typically a good kind of visual identity process usually takes around like 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes it's usually 6 to 8 weeks. At least for me, it's definitely not hey, I wanted this yesterday. Boom, poof, now I have a brand. Like a 1 week or 2 week turnaround is definitely unrealistic.
And so before I ask you about your making your leap, how and where can people find out more about you? You've got a free giveaway on your site. So tell us.
I do.
And how can they get that? I'll put the link in the chat as well.
Sure, yeah. So you can actually download the brand rehab checklist. So I actually created it for business owners so they could basically go through their brand, evaluate it and assess it, and then make changes if they needed to. I give you a checklist for those type A's that like to check the boxes and make sure they've got their T's crossed, I's dotted. And so they can find that it's on my website. You can sign up for that there. And my website is just my name. It's jodietaves.ca, and Taves, like you said, was spelled Toews. And Jodie is just with an I. Lots of spelling.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
Either. Spells it right. Okay. So JODITOEWS.com.
Yeah. .ca.
.ca.
Yeah.
Canada. Those of you who go there, and you can download the free assessment, take the assessment, and then also reach out to Jodie there. Is that where they should reach out, through your website? You want to
provide- Yeah, if you do want to contact me directly, there's a contact form right on the website there, and that's the best way to do it.
Awesome. All right, so tell us just very briefly before we wrap up here, what was your, I call it a leap moment, where you made the decision to go into business for yourself? And what did it take you to decide to make that leap? What happened, and how did you get yourself to make that leap? Because it can be a challenging leap for people who are getting into business for the first time, or maybe leaping to your next iteration, or actually up leveling. So when you made your leap moment, what did that take?
I wouldn't actually call mine a leap. I would call it a series of small hops. So the hops just kept getting a little bit bigger. So for me, it became, where do I want to be and how do I reverse engineer that? And so getting really clear on how we wanted to live and where we wanted to live. Really where I wanted to live was a driving factor. So I'm a prairie girl that has wanted to live in the mountains forever, and now I live in Revelstoke, BC. So I was like, well, how do I get there? How do I make that happen? And so that's why I started taking graphic design courses in 2016 while still working as a therapist. So I started taking courses and started practicing while I was still working full time. So I just started offering my services to people I knew needed logos. Hey, do you want me to help you do a logo? And so I just started to actually try to apply what I was learning in the moment. And then I listened to the 4-Hour Work Week. And that was like, okay, how do I work my current job remotely to give myself more time to build my business? And so I learned how to do all of my administrative, like an office day for me as a therapist. I learned how to do that remotely and set that up at work. Got my bosses okay on that, so I could work from home on those days. And then I eventually requested a decrease in my actual hours because I wanted more time to build my business, and I just couldn't do both of those things at the same time. And then in 2019, I just decided to go full time into business. I was just feeling really burnt out at work. And I was just at that tipping point where if I didn't jump in with both feet at that point, I wasn't going to be able to make my graphic design business work, because I had a foot in both camps, and I needed to make that final hop out of therapy and into graphic design full time.
So just that last piece, especially, what did it take for you to be willing to let go of the bag of peanuts so you could pick up the bag of cashews?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think I just reached that maximum point of discomfort where I'm like, I just can't do this another day. And then I have a really supportive husband who basically told me if I gave him a business plan, then he was totally cool with me quitting my job. And so I was like, well, I had the business plan in my head. So I typed it up and I gave it to him. He's, oh, you are serious about this. And so it's just having it written down and taking that step of being able to share it with someone that I had a plan. And then that was both of us needed to be in agreement and needed to be on the same page, obviously, because it's a family decision, having that final okay on there because he knew I was serious.
And I hear the short hops, but what I hear initially is you really got committed to having the life that you always wanted to have. And please clarified what the vision is for that. How would that look? And then you gave yourself permission to have it and said, okay, how do I make this happen? And then there was a bunch of hops, like you said, a bunch of iterations steps in the process. But then the second piece of that, the second real leap into it that I heard was, yeah, part of it was backing out of what wasn't working. But I think because you said you had the business plan and you had that kind of desire there, it was also a commitment, like literally writing it down and taking it and putting it into a structure is a commitment to, yep, I'm going all in. And then you brilliantly enrolled someone else's support and encouragement to support making that happen as well.
Yeah, having an accountability partner.
and rolled his support in the, yeah, you can do this. Such an important piece of that
Yeah.
having someone who's got your back and who says, yep, I see it, I support you, you can do this, off you go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And let's get real and on the court with how are you going to do it. So
Yeah.
I hear lots of hops in the process, but really permission and then commitment are the two pieces that I really heard made it happen along the way too. So thank you for this, ladies and gentlemen, and especially any of you who are thinking about getting some clarity around your branding. Go and get the assessment tool as a first step, and then reach out and have a chat with Jodie. She's very flexible and willing to talk to people about where you're at and what you want to do and accomplish. And we'll probably give you some great insights about, okay, well, think about this first, or yes, you're ready, and here's what you can think about if it comes to working with me. She's really very much about making sure that people get taken care of and get what they need, as opposed to being the solution for everyone on everything. So she'll be lots of willingness to meet you where you are and help you as and if she can. So reach out and say hi. Thank you for being here, Jodie. Thank you for your input and your ideas. And like I said, folks, if you got questions, put them in the chat underneath and we'll get back to you. And really think about what's the feeling I want to evoke and what's the first impression I want to leave people with. Those are probably the two key things that'll help you clarify how to.
And who do you work with?
And who do you work with? That's to clarify. Yeah, for the love of God, if you work with old people, don't have 8-point font. So many designers like little teeny tiny fonts, and anybody who's 50 and up is like so annoyed.
Can't read that.
Yeah. Think about who you work with and what they
Totally.
need. Exactly. Thanks so much for being here, Jodie. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a bodacious week. Take care.